Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in Gregory of Nyssa and his commentary on Ecclesiastes. We're going to take a look at chapter 2, verses 7 through 11, and the commentary will be pages 41 through 48. Let's begin with looking at the actual text, 2:9 through 11. We read, and this is Solomon speaking, "I became great, and my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired I took. But then I considered all that I had done, and discovered it was all vanity, nothing was truly gained." So if we break down the Greek concepts in the Septuagint, we read that in verse 9 he uses a megaluno, which reads, "I became declared great." So he says, "I became declared great." And then he uses prostothemu sophia, and "I annexed wisdom to myself." And then he says, "Beyond all persons who came before me." Better than anyone who came before me. A little bit of pride there. Then he says, "Aiteo ophthalmos, whatever my eyes asked for, I did not delay to acquire." Ukhusteros. And, but then he says in 11, "Then I attentively considered my workmanship and discovered matiotes, it was all vanity." It didn't have any real meaning to it at all. So we get a further breakdown in this discovery that all is vanity, but we also get the central egoism in this section. We discover the sin of pride. So block 2 is about Solomon's false identity of pride. Pride as sin. We recognize the vanity of this life. In these verses we read of Solomon's pride and his desire for others to serve him in bondage. Solomon had a false lordship. God has called human nature to freedom, not to bondage. Solomon considered himself ruler of all humanity, ruler of all creation. He had a false authority. He violated the boundary of authority. And we ask the question, or I should say the Bishop Gregory of Nyssa asked the question, how does ill-gotten wealth benefit the soul? Many wealthy persons live in pitiful lives. Solomon had a misplaced wealth. Prosperity fuels a false path for Solomon. He ends up exemplifying the highest form of vanity, the very highest form of vanity. He has a disease of avarice. So we read in 2:5, what kind of takos birth emerges from Solomon's marriage to gold, out of his travail of unrighteousness? Obviously, it's a life of unrighteousness, a life of pride, a life of sin. He exalts himself and says that he is declared great beyond every other person who'd ever lived before him, and that he always fulfilled whatever he desired. If he wanted something, he took it. Now let's move on to block 3 and take a look at this sin of covetousness. In 3, pleasure becomes the goal for Solomon. Covetousness is the root of all evil, 1 Timothy 6, and pleasure becomes one's goal. There becomes a need to resist this compulsion. Pleasure becomes concrete as covetousness. Sight is united with longing, and man's senses become a compulsive vanity. They become a compulsive vanity. And that's what happened in the case of Solomon. That is exactly what happened in the case of Solomon. But we read in the commentary, sense perception has a built-in limit. It cannot perceive the transcendence of God. Therefore, what it offers is limited with regard to its goals. And for Solomon, this longing and this compulsion became a wayward spirit. It actually was a false life of vanity, and it was an excess of vanity, a vanity of vanities. It actually became a terrible compulsion and defied and denied the Lord his proper lordship. Let's go back through this review, this section in Block 1. The key points in Block 1 are the fact that in a prideful way he says, whatever my eyes desired I took. And he uses aiteo for ask, whatever my eyes asked for, ukhusteros, I didn't delay in taking it. I did not delay in acquiring it. Ukhusteros. But he says, looking back, emblepo, he attentively considered his workmanship, and it was mataiotes. Mataiotes means empty, vanity, lacking real, lasting meaning. In other words, it was all a false lifestyle. No lasting significance, no lasting meaningfulness. And that was who he had become out of this compulsion of covetousness. So Solomon's really guilty of a false identity, and it's based on pride. He desired for others to serve him, and he put himself in the position that God deserved. He honored himself. He didn't honor the Lord. He considered himself Lord over all creation, all other human beings. He overstepped and violated the boundary of human authority. What did it benefit his soul? It didn't benefit his soul at all. He ended up walking a false path. And Gregory of Nyssa says, basically, he suffered a disease of avarice. And nothing could come out of that except falsehood and a false, wayward spirit. Pleasure was his goal. Covetousness became his compulsion. And he did not even open himself to the possibility of God's transcendence, or even open himself to this discovery of God's transcendence. He closed himself off by only desiring that which his eyes ask for. So basically, if we wanted to put together a recall triad here, we'd probably use mataiotes for vanity in Block 1. He still concludes that everything in his life has been empty vanity. And then in Block 2, we would probably want to emphasize his overstep of authority, his false authority. He violated the boundary of authority for humanity. Ill-gotten wealth actually caused his soul to suffer. And then in 3, we probably want to emphasize the fact that everything with regard to the senses is limited. It's a built-in limit. It cannot perceive transcendence. We must be born from above to acquire divine wisdom. Yes, he possessed wisdom, but it was wisdom of this earth. It was wisdom of natural reason, not divine wisdom. Divine wisdom is a gift from the living Lord. And he actually had closed himself off from the reality of perceiving transcendence. So the key issue here in 2:7 through 11 is Solomon's foundational sin. And it is pride. It is pride. And his desire to put other persons in bondage in service to him. So his entire life, looking back, he said, emblepo, means he attentively considered, by looking back, he attentively evaluated his life. Emblepo, he attentively considered his past life and came to the conclusion that everything has been mataiates, everything has been empty, meaningless vanity. That's the teacher interpreting Solomon. Remember, this is a teacher evaluating Solomon's life. So that's going to wrap up pages 41 to 48 in the commentary and 2:7 through 11 in the scripture text. We'll pick up next time on page 49 in the commentary and Ecclesiastes 2:12.